Welcome back, everybody, for our second and final set of the day. And you just saw our chair sponsor, Maxonomic, here in the SPL. And nowadays, more than ever, it's important to stay comfortable in these times when we're going to be spending a lot of time in our seats at our desk. Maxonomic, $50 off if you go to needforseatusa.com. Use the code SMITEMAX. Customize your chair, team logo, gamer tag, Gormiser's face, whatever you'd like. Especially in gaming, when usually if you're worse, it's because your gaming chair is worse. So Maxonomic, needforseatusa.com, and then code SMITEMAX. Gormiser, the man whose face we all want stitched on our chair, with me to talk about Obey versus Radiance, Gore. And this is a true maybe top versus bottom matchup when you kind of look at how the first couple of weeks have played out.
Yeah, Radiance, I feel like have taken the league by storm, and this is something to be said. Normally you look at teams like this that kind of form together and kind of question, like, there's a lot of huge names, but are they going to be able to mesh together the way people think? And so far the answer has been yes, and it's been a very resounding, loud, screaming from the back yes. Whereas Obey haven't been able to pick it up, and honestly, Dave, I don't know if I can call the set between Knights and Obey yesterday more than anything other than Obey getting dismantled. Like, it just from the get-go, they didn't have a grip on it. It slipped out of their hand very fast. If they want a hope against Radiance here, I think a lot of it's in the first few minutes. They need to control the pace of the game, or else Radiance is just going to be able to run away the same way the Knights did.
I agree. And it's tough because I think when you look at Obey, their losses have been pretty handy. But it's not without, some bright spots here and there. I do truly think that Obey have a couple spots where they can maybe build and start to improve themselves. I think
for sure.
Ducky in that solo lane has been a bright spot for them. I think Wowy in the hunter role as well. I think those are a couple of guys that Obey can maybe start to game plan around, and certainly haven't been, outclassed or anything like that. So I'm curious to see from game to game, week to week, if Obey maybe change up strategy, because there are absolutely players on this team that can compete at the highest level.
And I think credit where credit's due. The teams they've lost to, you had to look at Sanguine, who right now has kind of taken the league by storm, at least so far, and the former or current reigning world champs, right? So it's like you haven't necessarily had easy matchups coming into it, but they did look a little bit stronger against Sanguine than they did against the Knights yesterday. When they were up against Sanguine, they, 20, 25 minutes in, they're still even, kind of pushing Sanguine to the limits, and then maybe one team fight just doesn't quite go the way they want, and Sanguine kind of escalated their team play and take the game. Yesterday, that team play was a little missing for me from Obey, so if they can just snap out of whatever was there yesterday, kind of bring it in with a fresh mentality today, I think they can help control some of the pace against Radiance. And again, a lot of it, I think, is going to be pertinent in that first 10 minutes, just to make sure Radiance don't all of a sudden run away with the game.
Starting off strong, so important here for Obey, and you bring it up. Talk about a brutal start. Sanguine into the Knights, and now into Radiance, a team that has looked near unstoppable. A lot of people would argue are the best-looking team in the league right now in the game. Do you tend to agree with that sentiment? What's it going to take to maybe upend these guys?
Honestly, if they lose 3 sets in a row, then maybe you start to question, okay, maybe they're not number one, right? But CycloneSpin's been playing so clean. BigManTingz has actually shown up to be relatively large for this team as well, which is he's the one that, if you look at it, maybe quote unquote the weak link for them, and that's saying something considering how potent he has been. I think he actually had the highest average damage of every player through Season 6's. He's still and has always been potent. It's just interesting to see where exactly they might break apart. A lot of the issues people will tend to see with teams like this are more or less going to be communication issues and how they mesh together. It's never the player's skill that's in question. And right now, Radiance just seem to be hitting on the exact note they need to. Adapting's doing fine. Again, I'm going to say his name a second time because it needs to be said a second time. CycloneSpin has been insane, and if you don't shut down that duo lane, then, well, guess what? Late game, I know exactly where that hunter's going to be, and it's running through anyone that stands in his way.
And I think that's what makes me nervous about this matchup, Gore, is because I sort of brought up a couple guys on Obey that I think could propel them maybe forward into more success, and their matchups against Radiance, their lane opponents, aren't easy. I mean, Benji in the solo lane where Ducky will have to pair up, and then CycloneSpin for Wowy. It doesn't get much more difficult than going up against those guys. So I think it's going to be a tough one. Radiance fan favorites voting-wise in the SMITE client going into this one as well. I'm curious where ban priority will end up here. Obey looking towards the jungle early on and maybe a flex there with the Camazotz, but Thor first overall banned out, especially with adapting on Radiance. Doesn't surprise me one bit.
And what I love about Radiance, this is something I feel like we don't get to talk about this too often because of how little we get to see this variance, but I mean, they banned Ullr and Serket, which admittedly both have been potent for Obey. Wowy's Ullr has been very strong, and Inbound on that Serket is insanely potent at being able to get aggressive, get into your face, and cause a lot of disruption. So the bans make sense, but think of everything that's going to be open right now because of it. Hercules has been very big in some of these bans. You have Odin. You will have Merlin still available. A lot of these mages still at the forefront. So they get rid of something that is going to cause some trouble for them, like the Persephone, but they've left open enough strong picks that they're going to be able to scoop up a couple right here.
And Jormungandr first overall is what Obey will scoop up for themselves. I mean, Jorm in the solo lane has started to become a pro favorite. Plenty of safety with that World Serpent ultimate can potentially bully out lanes, change around team fights as well. So I don't mind them putting Ducky on that Jormungandr. I think it's a good, strong, as well as potentially safe pick, depending on the situation. Merlin and Ullr, Gore, that's been kind of a favorite 1-2 punch, maybe a flavor of the week, if you will, here for a lot of these pro teams.
Well, what is it? Last week we got the resurgence of Wlfy. This week we're getting Ullr a lot. And I can't complain. I like seeing the fact that there's a huge versatility in hunters that are coming out into the duo lane, especially because what you are getting out of them, admittedly at the end of the day, is all very similar, right? Ullr has high damage, has a stun capability. Ullr, stun capability. Wlfy, stun capability. Like, a lot of CC that's going to be coming out of them. Because you're looking at them, yes, still as your carry, but having the ability to either A, win a 1v1, self-peel, or set up your mid laner. Like, whichever one you want to put it in as a column, it's perfect to have them come through. They mesh a little bit better with the team. And right now, depending on what you go with him, Sobek's been kind of, again, another flavor of the week that's maybe been paired with this Ullr. But it can become a very fast kill lane there for Radiance if Obey don't pay too much attention depending on how these next couple of bans go.
A good stat, I think, worthwhile to look at. Bans against Radiance, Thor 100% of the time. Nobody wants adapting to pick up Thor against them. There is some jungle presence for Radiance in the bans, though, as well. Taking the Serket, the Daji, now the Wlfy away from Weekend. That's going to have to bump him down his own personal tier list maybe a little bit here. And Radiance have already gotten that Batz. That's such a strong pickup in the jungle, I think, and Obey are going to have to look elsewhere.
And they take away, so much. Again, Serket is something that can flex very well for Obey. Could go to Weekend, could go to Inbound. And either one is going to be very potent on it. But when you start to strip it away, yesterday we saw Weekend pick up a Susano, but it didn't quite go the way they wanted. There's still something in his wheelhouse. Still a ton of assassins that are open for him. But a lot of the top picks that have been kind of dominating right now are off the board. So he's going to have to reach even deeper into his pockets or just kind of run, maybe the salty run back, I guess, in a way, and try to make that Susano work.
I'm curious, though, Gore. I mean, with Jorm locked in, Sobek as well, we have seen some Sobek in the solo lane. Is there any world where we maybe see a flip-flop of Sobek in the solo, Jorm in that support Guardian position, or are you pretty confident that the Sobek goes support?
I'm pretty confident, only because of all of the supports, of all the Guardians in the game, Jorm just doesn't feel as good over in the duo lane. It's a very weird feeling, but he fits perfectly in the solo lane. It's very similar to Cerberus. Cerberus can technically be a Guardian, but he just feels better if you throw him off in the solo lane. And so I expect this to still try to set up the Wlfy, get things going for him over there, and honestly just hope for the best.
Well, the quick and easy question is, do you think Obey have kept pace with what Radiance have drafted? Because Radiance have a strong 5. Do you like what Obey have as well?
I like what Obey have, but there's a lot of middle ground there, specifically coming down for the Ravana. I need to see how it works.
Obey searching for their first win. Radiance trying to avoid their first loss. Game 1, let's kick it off.
It's opposite ends of the spectrum, isn't it, Dulcin? Finch and Aggro here on the cast as we move to Game 1 between Obey and Radiance. And strangely enough, no Odin getting picked up there after those bans. No Horus either after that really strong performance he had back in Set 1 Aggro. Instead, it's going to be Aror on this Artio pick that he's been playing quite a lot of here in Season 7 and looking pretty good on.
It's just an Aurora god through and through, right? It's a god that he can just get in there and affect team fights effectively with CC. He's going to bring good damage. It lets him be in your face all the time with a dash and a stun and a cripple. Aurora has been playing Artio basically since she was released and has always looked very, very good on it. And in this game, I think it could really give some problems to Wlfy on this Ho Yi. If CycloneSpin can make Wlfy use that jump, which should be pretty easy on Ullr, just an axe throw will do it for you most of the time, Aurora's long-range route is going to be the real key. I know when we think about Artio, we think of the cripple field, and that's a huge part of her kit, but I also think of her as a god that really punishes immobile enemy gods because of that long-range route. She's great against gods that don't have options in those moments, and that isn't really prevalent in Obey's composition here, but there's so much on Obey that is, or on Radiance, that's going to force you to use that jump, that then that route will basically act like it executes in some situations.
Well, to speak of immobility, as CycloneSpin gets plugged in but doesn't seem too deterred, we've seen a lot of this horrific emblem, I feel like. Maybe we can't talk about it yet. This is trouble for Inbound. It can't be another game where he gets first blooded, and yet it is. Radiance on the board here already, and he's got to make sure he's being more careful. But I'll let you, if you want to talk about that first blood, you can, or if you like my horrific setup, take that path.
Well, I mean, horrific is usually good in fights like that, where you're going to be brawling in the wave, and it makes it really hard to use your minions effectively because you're just so slow. But when you're going to let the enemy hit 2 first, that's going to be a problem for you, and that's exactly what Aurora and Cyclone do. Look at the way that Aurora and Cyclone position during that fight. Inbound finds the pluck, and they don't run away. They just make sure their abilities are landing on the opposition, but also on the enemy wave, because they know they only need a creep or 2 to hit that level 2 mark. And as soon as they hit it, Inbound's just dead. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with Artio. You use your movement ability, she starts life tapping you, and you're toast. There's just nothing you can do.
And this is why I'm so glad we're seeing the return to duo lane, because I think people kind of forget that CycloneSpin and Aurora are such a good pairing. You just didn't see them as much anymore when they were kind of spread around and Aurora was doing so much of the shenanigans in the jungle. But Aurora, I mean, in real life too, really does stick by CycloneSpin, man. He was really, really insistent on wanting to play with him here again this year, and for good reason. They're a great pairing, but you're seeing it materialize on the battlefield as well. Good coordination. Inbound and Wlfy get a bit too comfortable there in lane and get punished, and Aurora and CycloneSpin tick over into that level 2 first. And this is part of Obey's problem, man. It's not just that they struggle later on in the game, but they oftentimes don't start off on particularly good notes.
Agreed. I think that they've been picking a lot of late game compositions and they just haven't gotten there effectively a lot so far this year. This composition feels a little bit more early game focused, not super early game, but you don't need to hit 35 minutes for your comp to work when you've got a Ravana and a Sobek that's going to set yourselves up for some good success. And I like that a lot more, but they just can't afford to get first blooded that early in the duo lane, because how many games have we seen so far this year that are just won and lost in the duo lane in the way the duo lane performances are done? I think that it's been far more this year than basically all of last year at this point, because it just has been a true duo lane. I think game 1 of the first set today of Renegades versus United is a good example of that, where Baron and Jake just played lights out, and both Ionic and Snoopy had really poor performances in lane and in team fights. I think that that's going to have to be a focal point for a lot of teams moving forward here in Season 7. I just feel like it's exactly situations like that where you have to know that they're going to hit 2 off of a minion. So if we pluck here, and then I'm without a pluck, unless we can kill Aurora right away or force him weak enough that he can't step up with the level advantage, because they're on our tower line, we cannot play aggressively in that position. I just feel like it's been a lack of respect or a lack of prep for these duo lanes, because it's not just Inbound. This has happened to a lot of really, really good teams. This has been
Vote got destroyed, didn't he, the other day?
Exactly. I mean, that was a perfect example of it. Yeah, you expect that to happen a little bit better, and it just hasn't quite yet, and that's been surprising to me so far.
I think that there might be a bit of growing pain, sort of getting used to this 2v2 dynamic, because I mean, I think you could argue it's been a full year since we've seen it this consistently at this point now. And a lot of the pros have been talking about it. It's been a while since they've been playing at this level consistently too. So there is kind of a lot of just getting back into the groove, I think. It's just that all these games do matter, right? And the teams that came in ready for minute 1 are the ones benefiting. Right now that's looking like Radiance and Sanguine, who are up at the top of the standings. But we know everyone else certainly can catch up. They just got to make sure they're doing it a bit sooner rather than later.
These points really matter with this format this year. You really cannot afford to just give up some early games in the season because, we're still trying to find our footing. It's not too big of a deal. The way that the point system works now, where you get points based on your finish in Split 1, and world seeding is determined by the amount of total points you've earned throughout the year, means the difference between finishing 6th and 5th could be very, very relevant on making it to the World Championship and finding yourself in a seed that you like.
Exactly right. I believe it. I mean, we're getting way ahead of ourselves now, but I think it's only the top 6 that end up making it into that placement stage towards the end of this, that playoff stage too. So there's a lot that matters from these very first few matches. That's why I've been so impressed with these teams that have come in and looked comfortable right from the beginning. I mean, I wonder if that's part of what's hurting Rival. I mean, I don't think Twig looked 100% comfortable right when they first started, but he has looked better in their second matchup. It just, you got to make sure you're ready from that very first moment, because if you're not, the other teams will be.
And it's about Twig specifically. I think that role swapping is a dangerous game whenever early points matter this much in a season. But the hope is that you're gonna be so good later on down the line that it's worth it.
Well, Weekend getting aggressive, and he's got to on this Raven pick. Good positioning there from Benji, but he is still in trouble. The Jormungandr from Ducky will not be deterred, and he finds himself a kill, gets Obey on the board after they gave up first blood on the left-hand side earlier. Adapting here too, but Inbound made the rotation to keep him zoned out. Obey Alliance should be able to make it out of this, but Aror's aggressive blinking pass for Ducky.
Adapting still wants to get in there and use that Fear No Evil, but Ducky slows him down with that Venom. That's a beautiful play from Weekend and Ducky. It is not often that someone gets hit by all 3 charges of Jormungandr when they know it's coming. It's not in the middle of a hectic team fight. You don't see that very often, and Ducky was accurate there. He was decisive. That's something that I think that catches Jorm players in a bad spot, is that they hold that too long, and once they have time to juke, you're in real trouble. Ducky's using that emerge knockup to push Benji into his next shot. That was masterful use of that World Serpent.
And Ducky clearly comfortable. I mean, you heard them talking about on the desk that he's been one of the few bright spots for Obey here around the start of this season. I think I agree with Dolson and Gormizer on that point. Ducky did have some struggles in their most recent set, but for the most part, he's remained even in that matchup. It's just that by the time he rotates over, what I really feel like is holding Obey back is this 3v3. The Weekend Wlfy inbound synergy has not been there just yet. But when Ducky rotates over, a lot of the times things are already kind of out of reach of what he can change in terms of his solo lane impact.
Agreed, and that's why this change up from Obey to maybe camp Ducky, get him ahead, and let him be a factor earlier on in the game makes a lot of sense to me. I think that Ducky has definitely looked like Obey's best player through the first 2 weeks or so here. So why not try and set him up for more success? Now, I don't know that Jorm is really the hard carry god that you want to put that guy on, but it's certainly safe, and even if these first few ganks don't work, we're not going to throw the game off of it. Ducky can still be an impact player regardless of the outcome of these.
I do feel like this is Jorm's kind of ideal early game scenario, though, when he can build the Jade Emperors into the physical solo laner and the physical jungler, right? And it gives him such a big power spike over there, it's so hard to kill him. And ironically, to talk about Weekend spending time over there, I feel like when Weekend was kind of at his most successful was when he spent a bunch of time in solo lane helping his current opposition in CycloneSpin, right? And that team found a ton of success. I think that was around like Season 2 and Season 3. So I wonder if maybe there is something to Weekend doing some ganking over there, maybe getting Ducky ahead and playing aggressive. A CycloneSpin makes an early rotation over to mid and gets aggressive.
No fear from him, and a lot of fear from Obey Alliance. I mean, they don't know where a whole lot of people are from Radiance, and you think that CycloneSpin's doing that because he had backup coming. He didn't have that much, but can't really fault Obey for playing it fairly safe around this Ullr for CycloneSpin. And I love what he's doing right here, forcing Wowy back off this wave. There's nothing for him to take right now. As soon as that purple spawns, he might hard shove and give this wave over. As soon as it does, he backs up. But now you just sit here again and wait until Wowy has to step up on you, and you could try and full combo him. Just one axe is going to force his beads, because a full combo basically kills Wowy at this point. Cyclone has his 1 and his 3 nearly maxed, I'd imagine. His Transcendence is done. He does a lot of damage right now. You really can't eat a full combo from Ullr at this point.
No, and Wlfy very nearly in danger of it, does avoid that axe and a hail of arrows, so he is able to reposition. But I do want to talk a bit about Wlfy, who, you know, this is an important start of the season for him, right, as he took some time off, and I think there were a couple of questions about him on his way out too, and now he wants to come back in and show he can play at this SPL level. Maybe we'll have to wait to talk about it, though. Obey going for a sneaky Gold Fury, dropping the Sun. CycloneSpin is nearby as well. The Taiko Drums has already been used to try and keep him zoned out. That was clean from Obey as they steal the objective away.
Well done, but it cost them 4 ultimates, so now they have to be wary of any engagements that Radiance is going to put on their plate, because that's easy communication there for CycloneSpin. They used everything. He probably didn't see the Ravana ult, but he might have heard it on that Gold Fury, which is what made him check it in the first place. Even if he doesn't, that's still 3 ultimates that he knows for a fact are down. No surprise to see Radiance immediately into the enemy jungle, knowing those ults are on cooldown.
But this is good for me because that feels like, I mean, this Ravana pick for Weekend, which is something that can kind of be combative in the early game. A lot of the times it's picked as a bridge pick. This early focus on the Gold Fury and willing to commit all the ultimates, it feels like Obey are trying to solve the issue that we saw from them in their other matches, which is that they fell behind early too often. I think Inbound's aggression, and it has been a problem, it looks better if you're not down 5,000 gold all the time. So Obey coming in with a slight lead could be a bit of what they need anyway, just to kind of facilitate their own gameplay style.
I think this is the first time Obey has been proactive, healthy proactive in any game so far. They've had games where they jam it down a lane in the early game, but it usually doesn't turn out too well for them, or at least it hasn't so far. But this is the game where they are making good decisions, but good aggressive decisions. It's a really telegraphed gank on that right-hand side that just works through sheer brute force. From Weekend and Ducky, they played that really, really well. This Gold Fury pull is played perfectly. It's zoned away by Wlfy's ultimate. Cyclone knows he can't really full commit. Wlfy secures nicely with some help from Inbound on that lurking in the waters. This is the best Obey has looked, without a doubt.
Adapting has been a bit quiet, but Inbound might be in a tricky spot. Lurking in the waters, Weekend comes over to Bruno Evil is defensive from Adapting. The charged prey cannot land. Now Inbound stuck, but Ducky creates further space. Aurora's quite low, and Artio can be a bit immobile. She doesn't have the dash. Wowy is the one that punishes on the Ho Yi, but is quite low, has to retreat, and they want to try and keep surging forward. They know Ducky's at to pop up out of the ground sooner rather than later, but Adapt doesn't have the ultimate anymore. Just that slow he drops onto Ducky, and unfortunately it's CycloneSpin that ends up low. Good damage from Wlfy puts him down in dangerous threshold. They get the kill in the CycloneSpin, but they end up losing Ducky too.
A 2-for-1 in Obey Alliance's favor, so you like their odds right now. Looks like they defended their red buff at the exact same time. Really, really great rotation over from Ducky. He is there a full 15 seconds before Benji, and he's really the difference maker in that team fight, because Radiance back up and Obey surge forward, and you're thinking it's not looking great for them, but it's because Ducky's on the way, and he makes a big impact. Looks like Benji has found himself in a really bad spot. No ultimates available, but he's a little bit short of rage and the transform, and so he'll get picked off trying to proxy between Tier 1 and Tier 2.
Yeah, that's odd there from Benji in terms of his positioning. I mean, it's like you said, right? He was a bit later to that fight, still wanted to get something off of being on this side of the map, having walked all the way over here. He does not have teleport. He has the Blink and the Thorn, so on his way back, look for some farm, I suppose, and got punished. That means now Obey have a good opportunity to punish on the right side of the map, and they want Pyromancer, and no one is coming over to contest it. And it's not just aggro that Obey have been more proactive, but hasn't it felt like Radiance have kind of been on the back foot? We have not seen Adapting make an aggressive play yet on this Bots. I don't believe. They kind of been letting Obey come to them, but not having great answers.
Yeah, this has been tough for them to find these windows to be aggressive. Because of the proactivity of Obey Alliance. Adapting has really been playing these Wlfy picks, all centered around the ability to get these setups from either Benji or Aror or something like that. And this composition just doesn't do that. And I think that Radiance's comp scales better into the late game around this Merlin and the Hun Batz.
Sure.
But Obey's composition scales really well into the late game as well. It's not like theirs is really a big detriment. It's not like they're really far behind come late game. So Obey is really leveraging the fact that they've got this Ravana and this Sobek that can be really aggressive early on, and Radiance has just not been the ones determining exactly where the fights are happening every single time. And the times that they do try it, like on that red buff invade, Obey is there in force with numbers. Ducky is prepared, and they're early, and that's really been critical for Obey. It looks like they're reacting ahead of schedule, and they're also being proactive, and that's been impressive so far this game.
It has been, but I want to make sure we don't get, too far kind of away from the way that this is going so far here in this game. Doug, if we can see the charts, I mean, it's really not that big of a lead for Obey in terms of the golden experience. It's 1,400 gold, 1,000 experience. So even though this has looked like their best early game so far, which I agree with, it's certainly not blowing a Radiance out of the water or anything like that. This is good from them, but certainly not going to be enough. We are only through Chapter 1, I think, of a successful game for them. They got to turn the page and make sure they can connect this into more stuff in this mid-game once you start to approach that, and then beyond. It's been a good start, though, for sure.
Without a doubt. And I think that their comp really does well at this point in the game. We're out of the laning phase a little bit. We're starting to group up. 4-on-4s, 5-on-5s are going to be a little bit more impactful and a little bit more prevalent. And I like what Obey has in these 4-on-4s and 5-on-5s. They've got good CC. They've got excellent damage, solid AoE. Initiation is good between Inbound and Ducky. Even Weekend might be able to find an engagement if he can. Radiance is a little bit more counter-engage style. Benji wants to be able to blink in and find an ultimate right as Obey is going on their backline.
Oni Fury down half already. Obey have already gotten one Fury without Radiance contesting. What about a second? It looks as though Radiance know about this one, though. They've got a ward inside the pit. It looks Fury low. Obey do manage to secure it, but they've got some low health bars. Inbound in a tough position. Ducky lurking off to the side, but this disengage is clean. This is what I'm talking about. This start to the game was good from Obey, and now they're connecting it to more clean plays to further pull ahead.
And this is not the first time that we've seen this in particular from Adapting, where he just decides that he needs some solo farm right now. I'm heading to the right-hand side, and I'm getting something. They get the tier 1 tower over there. He probably dropped that enemy blue buff, or maybe it hadn't been up on respawn. But he gets a lot of farm. He gets over there. He finishes his Erendite. But Obey are just ready to go on when and where we should. Where's Adapting? Right side. He obviously can't get here in time. Let's pull gold and really force a 5-on-4, and they win it, and they don't try and get too much afterwards because they expend a lot. That's good shot calling from Obey Alliance in that moment. But again, it's not like they're blowing the game wide open. In fact,
not at all.
Radiance having split the map and getting a tower and stripping away some jungle and Adapting a lot of solo farm, he gets a lot of XP that actually puts Radiance ahead in total XP. The goal, that wasn't a Gold Fury, it was an Oni Fury, and this is where Oni Fury is at its least impactful, when there's not a lot of pressure on the map and Radiance is very free to back up and just knock down those waves. That isn't a big give by Radiance. I think if that's a Gold Fury, or maybe even a Primal Fury, Adapting probably rotates over, but knowing it's Oni in a game state like this, it's really, I think that farm that Adapting got and the tower Adapting got on the right-hand side is probably just more valuable.
I think I agree with that statement. Radiance still in a perfectly fine spot. And as you said, they are going to be moving into a late game where they feel pretty potent. Any team fight, I think, in the late game that has Fear No Evil in it is one that's hard to discount. The thing is, we have seen from Raijin lately that he is a really potent late game mage. He chunks. So does Merlin, absolutely. But I think that Obey have an even stance in terms of their fight. It's just that if I have to base it on who's been executing better lately, that's been Radiance, right? So I just feel like I wish Obey had been able to set themselves up a bit better to come in with some kind of advantage rather than toe-to-toe. But this is still better than what we've seen from them, so it's hard to get discouraged. Just Wlfy has to use beads to get away from the Fear No Evil. That's Adapting's blink and ult on cooldown, and all he got were the beads.
But that's still a good initiation, because Wlfy now is in trouble to something as simple as his jump is down because BigManTingz threw out a blizzard and he jumped away, and then Aror shows up and starts rooting him from a long range. He has to ult in that moment, or else he's going to get insta-killed. Adapting, not hesitating at all, trying to get those beads, and if he would have found that Sacred Monkey Toss, he probably would have killed Wlfy, or at least forced Aegis and or Ultimate, so because he could have followed that leap really, really easily. But quick enough beads from Wlfy make sure that Sacred Monkey doesn't land.
Pyromancer will go down for Obey. Radiance again not really contesting the objective. And so far, that's what Obey has really done well. I mean, if you kind of factor in, they've gotten 2 Furies and I believe 2 Pyromancers at this point, at the very least that last one. then I'm a bit surprised it's not more. Radiance really have done a good job of kind of sitting back, adapting in particular of power farming. And you mentioned it before, this is something that Adapting's been criticized for. I really think that Season 6 in particular, where we saw a lot of that from Adapting, where he kind of waited around on the fringes, spent a lot of time in the jungle, kind of biding his time for his moments. The thing was, he was pretty good at picking those moments. So if you're Obey, you got to make sure you're being mindful of kind of where Adapting is and what he might be setting up for lately. Even though he's been quiet throughout the early game, he can pull that trigger anytime.
And he's only getting stronger on the Hun Batz. I think you're going to start to see the difference in effectiveness between a Ravana and a Hun Batz at these points in the game. I mean, Hydra's Lament now means that Adapting wins the 1v1 as long as his ult is up against anybody in the entire game. I don't know that he has enough pen to be able to kill level 15 Sobek. His inbound's farmed very well. He's got a 2-level lead over Aror right now. But any squishy with that Hydra's and the Hun Batz passive working perfectly together, it's basically the exact same passive, you're gonna have a tough time up against this Hun Batz.
Not just him, there's Ullr as well. CycloneSpin building what we've seen more from these Ullrs lately, which is a lot of the pin tree, Crusher, Jotuns, and Titans often, and then like Heartseeker right there in the middle. And it's just pure ability based. They don't even build lifesteal a lot of the time, these builds, and these Ullrs are swinging in the late game. They can even still get lifesteal from the Axe stance, obviously, as well. I like where CycloneSpin's going with this.
Me too. I've been playing with this build a decent amount as of late. It feels really, really good to use because it makes you a lot harder to dive. Ullr is a character that is notoriously hard to, or easy to get on top of and focus, particularly in the late game. But with Jotun's Wrath and this Transcendence, because of the Ullr passive of using abilities and Axe stance reduces bow stance cooldowns and vice versa, you're able to just throw your abilities all over the place and jump like crazy.
Gold Fury, and it is a Gold Fury this time, is down to about half, and they're still pulling it. They reset it a bit as the ultimate comes out from Adapting. That does force the CC immunity out from Ducky, who I believe picked up the beads. In goes Benji trying to get aggressive. Obey, though, have grabbed the Gold Fury, and Radiance want to keep up the aggression. It's going to be tough, though, to keep this chase. The disengage from Obey has been so clean all day long, and it looks like they're going to make yet another clean escape, but Radiance are still grouped, moving in towards mid, maybe a tier 1 tower to try and punish.
It feels like Obey is playing keep away this whole game. I mean, every time Radiance is like, okay, we're ready to fight, Obey is like, nah, we don't want to. We're gonna back up. We've got plans, and we've got something we got to go and do. And Radiance has been really itching to take fights around these objectives, and really, both Ducky and Inbound have done a great job at keeping Radiance at bay without overextending. It is really easy to overextend against a composition that has Ullr and Merlin and Hun Batz, because those are all CCs that can catch you out and put you in bad spots, even as frontliners. And Obey's frontline has done a great job of making sure they're staying at home, they're not going too far out, but they're creating enough space for Obey to use those ultimates. Sunbreaker buys you space. That Tycho Drums buys you space. And it's also giving you DPS on the objective at all times. And Benji hasn't been able to blink in at the right times to find these initiations. Aror is really not going to be able to do that same thing that something like a Horus can and set you up to insta-kill a frontliner. It's a little bit more long-term engagements, bit of disruption. He's going to provide a little bit of damage himself, but Aror is not playing the, okay, we're ready to kill this guy instantly sort of character on Artio. It's, I'm going to root this guy eventually. I'm going to get there, but hopefully they don't have anything to interrupt me or get away. This composition just isn't really well built to handle what Obey's frontline is doing, which is just standing in front as long as they're close enough to their team where they can't get all in by these Fear No Evils.
You're right. I mean, it feels like Ding Dong Ditch maybe or something like that from Obey. They get what they want and they are dipping right afterward. They're not sticking around much to try and have to face the consequences of what they've chosen to do. And Radiance haven't been able to lock them down. But still, time kind of keeps marching on, right? And Obey keep taking these really, really small victories. And I do keep having this question about how they're going to turn that into a bigger one. I mean, here we are around the Fire Giant, 24 minutes into the game. And Radiance can fight into this. I don't think they need to give any extra respect to Obey than they would to any other team at this point based on the lead or anything like that. This is a very even one for them still, and they can absolutely take this fight.
Yes, this game is effectively even right now with a slight lead for Obey, but experience difference, Aurora's caught up to Inbound, as you usually see around this point in the game, because that experience buff to the lowest level character and how hard minion waves scale, level 20s for basically everybody else. not a huge itemization lead for anybody on Obey Alliance. This game is effectively even, but this is where Obey should be using their slight lead. This is where ward coverage is really big usually for teams that are this slightly ahead, because it lets them still finish the item that Radiance can likely also finish, but it leaves you with 200 extra gold left over for a ward and some sentries.
That's big knockup from Benji. The Fear No Evil's there as well, and Wowy now quite low has already used the beads and adapting dunks right on top of him. Benji still trying to stick to inbound but can't get the damage. They get adapting out, but what about in the backline? Weaken could use some assistance as well, and Aror is sticking to Wlfy, so he won't be coming in to provide backup. That's a 2-for-0 now in favor of Radiance, and Wlfy still zoned out of this engagement slowly by Aror. Benji continues to die, forces Ducky out as well. Radiance have gotten the 2-for-0, but they're a bit low. What can they get on the back of this?
I don't think that they can really pull fire with a whole lot of confidence, knowing that Ducky has TP up and is completely healthy. Pyromancer's already down. That might be about it, but that is exactly what can't happen to Obey Alliance, where they get separated in these jungle fights. Obey has been so good around these Gold Furies at staying close to one another, but not so close that we're grouping up. It's easy for them to pick their targets and also escape all the same way. That time they get a little bit split. Fear No Evil and that huge ultimate from Chulainn combined to really split up that Obey front line from the back line, and they grouped up a little bit too much after the fact.
Well, Fire Giant has been pulled now, aggro. Half HP as well, and Radiance still feeling like they're favored. Tingz has all his relics. CycloneSpin still has beads as well, so they are favored to start this up. In fact, it's not even really a battle. They burned it before Obey could even make their way into the Fire Giant pit, and now they are going to get aggressive. Aror gets right to the back line. Fear No Evil separates inbound. He's low, but not dead. In fact, Aror is the one that ends up falling. Adapting gets the other support, though, taking down inbound. 4v4 is Radiance on the disengage.
But Wlfy's looking for a little bit more alongside Ducky. Aegis from BigManTingz is going to be good, and Benji is still plenty healthy.
Look at the damage he still has. Wowy gets gobbled up, and Benji hasn't even transformed. CycloneSpin takes down Wlfy, and Benji in his final Frieza state ready to keep on fighting. Weekend and Ducky got to fully get on out of here. And if I'm Radiance, I'm regrouping at this point. They can start pushing down some of these structures. They got plenty of time. 45 on Wlfy, 40 on Wowy, 15 on inbound. Radiance now in a good spot.
Just a weird decision by Obey. I mean, it looked like they could have contested fire, but they didn't really want to. Okay, we'll have Ducky and Wlfy try and steal it, but now we're caught out because Inbound had to go in so deep to try and protect us. You're either giving that fire or you aren't. That felt like a middle-of-the-road call, and middle-of-the-road calls lose you games all the time.
And it might end up hurting them here. Weekend is in trouble, and Adapting wants to grab the kill. Horrific from Inbound keeps him alive, but that meant no one was defending the right side. Phoenix Radiance burned through that one easily, and now they're on the retreat. And I didn't want to sound like an Obey naysayer or anything, but this is my concern, that Obey only got these small incremental victories. It never really got them very far ahead. In the late game, Radiance win 1 or 2 team fights, and now they're in control.
It just wasn't enough to really be a huge lead. And they were in the game, but being completely even, it means you still have to make the game-winning plays. And really, Radiance has done a better job of that so far. Both of these compositions are pretty good at this point in the game. I still think that Radiance has a slight edge around now, 30, 35 minutes. But when the big fights were happening around 25, 23, Obey's comp was just as good. I just think that their positional advantages, the things they were doing so well on the left side of the map, kind of got lost in translation when trying to get over to that right-hand side. Inbound was a little bit too split off from the rest of the team a lot of the time, and then dashes in, pulls his carries up with him in a way, because they're stepping up to try and help him. That sets up Benji for a huge ultimate coming around that left side back harpy. Yeah. And then again, that Fire Giant fight where are we contesting or are we not? The shot calling was phenomenal through the early to mid game for Obey. I thought they were doing a lot of things really well. Clear, cohesive calls around these objectives. What are we doing? When are we burning? What are we doing after the fact? All of that was crystal clear, very clearly. But on that right-hand side, when it gets a little bit harder, when, okay, a little bit more pressure's on us, we are reacting now, that shot calling seemed to fall by the wayside a little bit and be a little bit more muddied because it looked to me like Obey couldn't make up their mind on whether or not they were contesting that fire.
Radiance still have a little less than a minute on this Fire Giant. All the tier 2 towers are down. Remember, in right, that Phoenix is entirely down, so that minion wave will threaten the Titan. Ducky is trying to keep too busy over in mid. Meanwhile, in left, the 3-man split from Radiance threaten this Phoenix, but someone's got to go back to deal with these minions. They aggress onto the Titan, and that is the window Radiance are waiting on. 30 more seconds left on FG. Inbound goes in aggressively with the charge prey. Doesn't find much. Fear no evil. Pins weakened against the wall. He ends up living too, and Ducky wants to go for the dive, but Benji's doing a dive of his own, shuts down Weekend in the back, pops the thorns, knocks up Inbound as well, and forces him to head for the hills. So far, Radiant's getting everything they want off this push. The left side Phoenix is going to come down.
And Benji even lives. Aror not quite as lucky. He ends up eating a little bit too much damage from Wowy, but still that Titan down to about half HP. I love what Radiance does there, because the normal 4-1 split is really hard to win against a Ravana, because he has 2 forms of CC immunity, and so you can't just burn one and then all in him. He's got good mobility. He can hit you from a range with the 3 and then get in, and his auto chain lets him out trade you pretty effectively. So what they do instead is they 3-2. They leave Benji and Adapting in the mid lane, and then they all transition to a full 5-on-5 on that left-hand side. And Obey just a little bit slow on going in. Inbound gets too poked out, so then he feels like he has to get in there before we give up this Phoenix. He ends up getting really low, gets a pretty good horrific off, but gets low, and Adapting blinks into a Fear No Evil right away, and is just too late on the purification beads. He takes 98% of his health bar before he can leap away, and then that's an easy cleanup for Benji. Against the Han Batz at this point in the game, you're going in, he's not going to look at it, he's going to Fear No Evil you. You have to use those relics preemptively. They were just a little bit too late there from Weekend.
Another strong fight from Radiance, and only 14 kills in 31 minutes. They've all been precise fights. Even from Obey in the early game, those were precise fights that they were taking. It's just that when it got to this point, they had some struggles. This Fire Giant will go down for Radiance uncontested, but it feels a bit like Obey are where Renegades were in week 1, right? Where they could play well through the early game and then struggle at the 23-minute mark. It just took them a couple of weeks of ramp maybe to get to that same spot. We'll have our chance to see as we watch more games from them. But Ducky wants to take the fight outside the Phoenix. He pays for it, never even gets the ultimate off as the Fear No Evil locks him down.
Yeah, that's again, your Yorm, I've got beads, but that ultimate takes a long time to go off. You're never going to get a chance to at this point in the game. He gets eviscerated. CycloneSpin finds a nice kill on the other frontliner in Inbound.
Benji just goes right to the Titan. This game should be over here at this point as Aror comes in to try and help him out. Meanwhile, the rest of the team's still fighting on the right side. Phoenix, they've just left Wlfy to try and defend this all by himself, and he just can't do it. The Titan ends up going down in favor of Radiance. 32 minutes was all they needed to grab game 1.
But look, that was a much better Obey Alliance than what we've seen from them so far this season. And Radiance looked like they were a little bit willing to wait it out, take it to late game. We feel confident we're going to win there. And for good reason, clearly. They looked phenomenal once those 5-on-5 started up. But I think that this is a good first step to Obey Alliance, because we haven't seen them take a lot of winning steps so far this year. This is the first one for them.
You're right, man. Obey certainly did look better in this game. And closing games out is things that every team struggles with, right? And they weren't even in a position where I would say they were favored, so closing it out doesn't even necessarily feel fair. Radiance is a tough squad. Obey played well in game 1. We'll see if they can bounce back in game number 2 as I'll get it back over to Dolson and Gore on the desk.
This one's a little bit more tumultuous in the early game for Radiance, but at the end of the day, they're able to stall it out and grab a win here in game number 1. Gormizer, Obey did kind of exactly what you wanted to see them do. Make an impact on the early game. They do get first blooded, but then they take a kill lead, a 1,500 goal lead over the next few minutes. But I think then things just kind of stagnated. They get a few Furies, but never were able to push that advantage.
The best thing I could say was that they, especially compared to yesterday, they collected themselves, right? There was better team play, there was better objective play, they have good dances around the first few Furies, they get the first few Furies. It really does come down to that one fight, like right prior to the Fire Giant, where Obey lose just barely, but they get pushed out, pushed back into base, and while immediately afterward Radiance couldn't get Fire Giant, they were able to back, respawn, run up, get fire, and win another fight right after. It was about 26 minutes into the game. And that is very similar to what we saw out of Obey against Sanguine, right? 20 to 25 minutes of keeping pace and keeping them locked down, and then unfortunately at the very end getting forced into some scenarios that you're not able to make a good decision, right? It's a bad decision on one side, bad decision on the other, and that's where Radiance really forced them out of their comfort zone. They were just able to force them into engagements that, I mean, you don't want to take them if you're Obey, but if you don't take them, you're going to lose even harder, so you have to commit to it. And unfortunately, that's where Radiance and Sanguine a couple weeks ago were playing strong against them. And of course, when you jump in and get really solid ults, or when you have this amount of CC that you can lock down, you're trading maybe support for 2 or support for no one on their side. Radiance were doing wonderfully at making sure everyone got out and kind of peeling themselves away.
I think this is kind of a two-pronged takeaway here, in my opinion. I think great on Radiance to be able to extend this game out, keep that gold lead and XP lead as small as it was. I mean, there was a point in the game, didn't have the specific numbers, but Obey was in the lead gold-wise, but there were still a couple of members on Radiance. I think it was Hunter rolling in the jungle as well, most notably, that had XP leads. So I think that's good from Radiance. But a similar vibe to I think what you pointed out to Renegades, where despite Obey losing, they at least look better. I think that's the takeaway here for Obey. You looked better, a little bit more clean here. Now you look towards Game 2, Gore. If you're Obey, remember there was a pretty heavy jungle priority in the Radiance bans. Is there anything that you look towards picks and bans that you didn't like from Obey, or Radiance for that matter, that maybe you look to change here for Game 2?
I don't know, and this is something that's going to be difficult for Obey because their bans specifically were absolutely fine. It realistically came down to the fact that Hunbat's getting through has been a big problem for a lot of these teams. His ult has been very potent for years. I mean, you go back in time, he had crit, but now he just hits you really hard. Either way, he's a very potent jungler. But I mean, what are you going to give up to ban that out, right? The Thor, the Yemoja. Thor maybe being a little more potent than we've seen out of the Hunbats. Yemoja definitely causing more trouble than it's worth. Although if you look at the United Renegade set, I think she was just forgotten both games. So maybe you could afford at this point to drop the Yemoja, but you don't know if it's worthwhile yet, right? Like her nerfs, especially coming into this last bonus update, have gutted her scaling, so she doesn't do as much damage, but the healing's still there, the shielding's still there, and the stun is still there. It's just not going to be maybe as potent. And it's, do you want to roll those dice? Do you want to play that game? And I think I like what Obey do, and they just say no.
Absolutely. I think, strictly speaking, Obey have banned out 3 very powerful gods, especially given the players on Radiance. They stick with that Jormungandr first pick overall, though, and I think Ducky, again, looked fine on the Jorm, and I think kept him alive a few times, even got a kill there in game number 1. But do you think that's maybe an overextension with so much power still on the board to go right back over to that Jormungandr?
Yeah, it's the same question I think we had, well, not even question, just statement about certain first picks where it's just like, is it going to be good enough to win you the game? And you did it last game, and it was potent, it was powerful, but it didn't win you the game. Do you go back to it first pick? I'm inclined to say no. It does depend on the performance this game. Maybe that was the most comfort pick. Maybe it's something they're trying to strip away from Radiance. It's that high priority for them, but I just don't know if the Jormungandr is warranting enough for me to say, yes, you have to pull that in to be first pick. Whereas Ullr and Merlin played exceptionally fine, right, when they came into it. So they did enough damage. They have enough control. I think Radiance going back to pretty much the same picks is exactly what they should be doing.
I agree. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. We're going to get a mirror matchup, really, Hunter-wise. Radiance get the Ullr again. Huyi over to Obey Raijin one more time. Seeing Raijin kind of rise to prominence here, exactly at a 50% pick ban rate and exactly at a 50% win rate. But Gore, there, I mean, the Hunbats right back over to Radiance for adapting. It's just so scary.
It's the qualm that comes through, and this is honestly nothing Obey can do about it, right? You are first pick. You ban 3 really powerful gods. The best you could do is first pick one of these gods away from Radiance, maybe, to try and pull that into your favor. Of course, then maybe you give them the Jorm, and there's something to be worried about there. But my eyes are coming on the fact that Ullr, Merlin, Hunbats are all incredibly potent and powerful. We saw what they were able to do last game. I expect them to do something very similar this game, maybe even at escalated rate just because now they're comfortable on it and they kind of know what to expect out of Obey. So they can predict that first 20 minutes a little better. They can maybe counterplay it a little better. The problem with making a kind of a run back at the first game is that unless you can drastically change the style that you're playing these gods, you've now kind of shown your hand and they should know how to counter it.
Well, the first large difference from Game 1 is now this Hercules being locked in, but Radiance, yet again, they're going to lock in Batz. Serket was already banned out, Daji as well, Wlfy also gone. So again, you're gonna force, and then Thor, of course, banned out. So you're going to force Weekend to move to something less conventional. It was the Raven in Game number 1. I am curious to see maybe where we go. Susano has been a popular pick here. But I like the way Radiance have looked at this. If you're going to give us the Batz, we'll just take away 2 more of those junglers and force Weekend down the tier list a little bit.
And I'm a big fan. If you roll back to something Finch said at the very beginning of the game, it was the fact that Odin had kind of gotten glanced over. And I think Hercules is going to be in that very similar vein. He was kind of glanced over, but with an Ullr beside him, it's going to be very deadly. Kumba helps bring some of that potency back to Obey, but they lock in the set. It's, again, a different look, a different assassin to pull forward, and I think it can work out well here. I'm not sure if I can go in and say, yes, Obey have the win here, but they're trying something different, and that might be enough.
Have to give them props for bringing something new to the table. Can they bring a win to the table? We'll have to go into Game 2 to find out.
Well, that would also be something new if Obey were able to find that W here up against Radiance. They've had some struggles here at the start of the year, but as Agro was talking about last time, it is still me and him here, Caston, they looked better in Game 1 than we've seen them look yet. And it might be even too much to ask, based on what we've seen, for them to just suddenly overcome Radiance now. We just want to see them build on some of those good habits I think they built in that first game, and maybe with Weekend on this set who has some hyper carry potential, maybe that can be it.
But this is the type of composition that concerns me for Obey, is that they've struggled a lot in early games. In last game, they pick Weekend something that fights better early on, that puts them in a good spot, unlike Wowy, by the way, who's in a horrible spot after Aror just exerts his will on Hercules, as he always does.
He doesn't miss his 2. It's crazy.
It's auto-locked, dude. This guy hacks, on God. But the set is not an early game character. And so I'm just always concerned when this is the direction, like, okay, we're just going to get to late and then we're going to win. I would have gone the other way, where I think that Obey didn't need more late game in order to win Game 1. They needed more early game. They had the early game. They just needed to bump that lead up more. It's just a different style. It can work. Maybe they feel like, okay, we understand how to play the early game against Radiance now. We can play it without as much early game presence and just do it because we understand how to do it better. That's certainly a possibility. It's just not the direction that I think that I was expecting in picks and bans.
I think that the way that I would describe it is like that loss they took in Game 1, that's the kind of loss that can be easily folded into a successful season, right? Where you get to 30 minutes, you lose a team fight, and it just doesn't quite go your way. That's fine. Yep. What we've been seeing from them in the other weeks has been just non-competitive, right? They've been getting blown out of the water before they even get there. And that's why skewing more late doesn't make so much sense. If they're trying to move on from those types of losses that they can't have, you would think it would be more like what we saw in that first game, but a bit more around setting themselves up to have a better late game. So it is a bit sort of confusing, the direction that they're moving here with it. But I think that if they can maintain that parity, right, do some of those same things, but maybe just make sure they get to that late game with some parity, then they'll be in a good spot. Kumba is excellent setup, and Set will absolutely thrive in all that chaos.
Without a doubt. And it's really, really good dive potential onto this Ullr. I mean, Set just does so much damage when left unchecked. But Benji is going to be there on this Athena to help with that dive. I mean, giving your carry damage mitigation is huge, and then a big burst of damage when she lands. I do think it's worth noting, though, that Radiance's composition, I mean, that game turned around because Benji found a couple of really big ultimates in these team fights. This comp doesn't 5v5 as well as the last comp for Radiance. Radiance's composition scraps much better than it did in Game 1. I think that they were very cognizant of the fact that they did not have a great early game and want to remedy that with this Hercules and Athena picks. Athena affects the map a whole lot earlier. I think that Radiance really understands that Ducky made a huge impact of that early gold rotation over towards Gold Fury in game number 1. This is a composition that's going to set themselves up to be in a better spot around 25 minutes, but might not be quite as well-rounded come that 35, 40-minute mark, because that global ultimate from Athena gets a lot less valuable whenever you're already standing in a 5-on-5 situation.
Right, it's not necessarily a team fighting ultimate so much as perhaps like an initiator or even a disengage tool at times. But I do think that maybe as long as Aror and Benji can kind of swap the roles they had from last time, this is still really tough to fight. I mean, where do I use my beads up against this composition from Radiance? Is it from the Axe Stun or the Hercules pull or Fear No Evil or the many taunts Benji will be throwing out too? I think that's a pretty good question that Obey are going to have to be struggling to answer, especially because not everyone on this squad for Obey has that CC immunity in kit. These beads are really going to be important.
It's going to be hard to hold on to them because you're dead to anything you just said. All of them, they kill you. None of them are poke CCs, you know? You're getting all in off of basically all of those. So Obey, one of the ways to handle these compositions that put a lot of pressure on your purification beads is to just kind of run it down and just never let the enemy team set up. And these beads burning compositions are really good when one person can go in and get your beads, and then in the laning phase, maybe a minute later, someone shows up to punish you for it, or in a team fighting phase, you have to wait for your beads to go off and wait for them to fall off, and then they CC you. One of the ways to counteract that is to be able to just run at them and never give them a chance to set up these set plays, especially in the laning phase, where you can just play so aggressively that they don't get a chance to set their feet and really punish you for not having beads because you're the one punishing them for trying to go with this more elaborate cerebral play.
I do wonder, to talk a bit about the solo lane, if we're going to see more attention over there. I think one extra thing this Athena does is it does break up that Jade Emperor's Crown start we talked about last game that's so good against the physical jungler, physical solo. Instead, Ducky's going with this Stone of Binding start, which is still strong, and it gives him some of those all protections that he's going to need. But I think that Adapting's ganks over here on the Ducky might be a bit more potent than they would have been last time when they felt like maybe they would struggle to fight on this right side of the map.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, Stone of Binding's a core item on Jorm because it's just so easy to proc and gives you everything you want, but you don't necessarily want it this early.
Well, Benji is going to be getting involved this early, and it couldn't have been better time. They need help with the gank, but two members end up going down. One on the side of Obey and one on the side of Radiance. Inbound is inside the Sleepy Pass when Wlfy can't stick around. The Fear No Evil from Adapting is here as well. So even though Aror goes down, it's a 3-for-1 in favor of Radiance to start this game off. Perfect use of that Athena ult, because look at the right side of the map. There is nothing up for Ducky to take. What's he going to do? Auto the tower a little bit? Sweet. I'll see you there, King. No worries here. Benji gets over there, gets 3 assists, a huge burst of gold. Aror has a phenomenal ultimate. Shocker that Aror is really good at landing those Hercules ultimates in the right spot. He double bounces everybody in that moment. Weekend is really good at finding these extended engagements, right? He wants to get a lot of healing off of Kingslayer at this point in the game. No chance when he gets insta-killed like that. That was beautiful by Radiance. And those are the kind of fights I think that you were talking about that Radiance wants to take in terms of they want these kind of scrappier ones. And here where they can get like the numbers advantage by having Benji rotate over sort of favors them too. But instead of a big sort of set 5-on-5 where you have to find a way to get in there with your initiation, instead they just all of a sudden have swarmed Obey on this left-hand side. They've overwhelmed them in the early game and got a tremendous advantage. I mean, 2 of those kills go into CycloneSpin on this Ullr, and we know what he can do with a lead. This is a pretty scary start for Obey, though it's not entirely doom and gloom. I don't want to make it sound like they've been blown out of the water already, but that is a scary way for things to begin.
The door is open to blowout city, though, right? I mean, now you've got Wowy with no beads. You've got Aror with a lead. He's already got the Talaria boots there. He's working towards either Thebes or probably going to be a Shield of Regrowth, knowing the way that Aror likes to build the Hercules with just a ton of movement speed. Wowy has to be very, very careful for these next 45 seconds because he is going to be pressured by CycloneSpin, or Radiance is just going to look to pull a Gold Fury or something to force Obey into a bad spot. But this is the danger zone where you can fall behind pretty quickly. Dying once, usually not a huge deal. It's dying, going back to lane, and then dying again that sets you back really, really far.
And Radiance, exactly the kind of team that could potentially punish him for it. Aror was willing to commit the boulder a minute ago for the red buff, but it might be more worthwhile to mention that 3 members of Radiance rotating over to right. They elect not to commit, though. Ducky should be okay for now. They'll head back towards mid. But Aror, this is how he plays, and he plays Hercules. I like to say he walks the tightrope, perhaps more than anyone else on these aggressive support picks. And it feels like he trusts his instinct. He goes for these sort of riskier plays that are high return if he's able to execute them.
And he usually does execute, which is why he's been so successful. Weekend gets plucked, but a good mez by Inbound prevents that push back.
And Wlfy wants to keep this going because Ducky's rotating in. Defender of Olympus mitigated almost enough, but not enough. Ducky shuts Aror down, but Fear No Evil is here for the cleanup again. Bring the mops out as Adapting comes in to try and clean up some kills. He only gets one as they shut down Weekend and Trade, but CycloneSpin lurking around the bottom. Award's there. He knows that the game is up, and instead he just retreats.
And Aror happy with that trade, I'm sure. Support for jungler, always worth it at this level, but that's another great rotation by Ducky that really Benji's only able to match because he's playing a global ultimate god. Ducky uses that pressure that he's gotten, that early ult to the left-hand side. I highlighted how there was nothing up for Ducky to take, but it's given him, he still gets an extra wave. He still gets to push a wave under tower that Benji loses, and he's leveraged a little bit of that extra lead into a great spot.
Aror is so good at Hercules, getting Wlfy pulled all the way back and forcing out his beads yet again. I mean, but this guy is just one of the best that we have out there right now. But that was a good play from Obey, and I love sort of the synergy that they're playing around, especially around this Jormungandr, because they first picked it aggro instead of a lot of that good stuff that was still up. You heard Gord talking about how it can feel bad to ban away the Ullr or the Unbot sometimes, or the Merlin, when there's so many good things you have to ban. Well, instead, they're using that first pick slot to make sure they keep putting Ducky on this Jorm. And if he's going to make rotations like we keep seeing from here in this set, then I think I'm on board.
He's looked really good so far on this pick for sure. I think that it's interesting that Obey's willing to take first pick right now, because I feel like first pick's in a little bit of a disadvantage in a meta like this, and that's where there's no clear number one best god that you can really mess around with picks and bans in order to get.
Well, the Sacred Monkey from Adapting could have meant that it can blink him. I think it's weighted out a bit by Wowy, and Adapting doesn't want to commit underneath the tier 2 that far at this point. So good, well played by Wowy to get him out of there. He doesn't have beads. I think that's why Adapting's over here. He knows he's a sitting duck, but couldn't capitalize there. They should be able to get this tier 1, and Aror might even be able to get a bit more. The tower comes down. Good mez from Inbound, though, cuts out the aggression.
That was really, really smart by Wowy, because knowing that Adapting can't really teleport to me when I'm hovering in midair in the dive bomb like that, and even if he does, it's right underneath me and won't be able to close the gap towards where I'm jumping to. And Sacred Monkey does not have a long teleport window, so Wowy waits it out and saves his own life. Doesn't save his tier 1 tower or the Gold Fury, but those things were going down regardless with the way that Radiance was able to move Obey around the map and really, again, put pressure on the characters that don't have purification beads.
Weekend trying to contest with Benji, or maybe the other way around, Benji contesting Weekend in his own jungle. And those charts just now, I think, showed us the difference between the game 1 that Obey had when they were in control with not a lot of kills, and then this game 2 where Radiance are in control with a relatively low kill amount. I mean, they're 2,300 gold, 4,700 experience, as opposed to maybe 1,000 gold and an actual experience deficit that Obey had in game 1. They played that early game well, but this is what these top-end teams do with their early game leads. They really do turn it into a lead where you might not ever get back into it.
And it's because of the way that Radiance is grouped. That's the big difference. When you look at the way both these teams have played in games where they feel like they have the momentum and can get a lead, Obey split the map a little bit more, they spread out to farm, and then they'd group up for objective time, right? They'd get together right around the time where Gold Fury is about to spawn. Radiance splits up when there's buffs to get on their side, and then immediately coalesces on wherever they can put the most pressure. Right now, it's knowing that Wowy doesn't have beads, so where's Adapting? On tower line. If there's enough of a rotation over from Obey because of good ward coverage by Radiance, they know they don't look for it. Otherwise, they look for things in mid.
Well, now there's another carry without beads. It's Wlfy as those get forced out by Aror. Benji dash in for the taunt, and Weekend loses his beads. The boulder nearly gets the job done by itself, but it does open up the door for this tier 1. Ducky's going to rotate in the back to try and disrupt this, but immediately gets controlled. Might even have to channel the ultimate if he's not careful, as he gets taunted back in for the overhand smash. But Ducky, the wiser man here, recognizes he's not in that much trouble and defends the tier 1.
But again, it's just grouping up from Radiance. They're forcing Obey to be in the right spots. Now Ducky has to use the ultimate just to buy some time for Wlfy to get over to this fight. And it's just Radiance understands, each of these players understands their role down to a very, very strong level. Look at the relic choice by Benji in this game, in the build by Benji. It's CDR focused. He knows what his job is. Use that ultimate to get to whatever fight we need. Let's get Shell, because we know we have enough initiation with the Hercules from Aror and with adapting, and even CycloneSpin's Axe, that we don't need Benji to be a tertiary initiator. He's there as the peel machine. So he's going to ult whoever Weaken's ulting, land, and then shell them. Weaken has a tough time really going on anybody in this game. I mean, he's already behind. He's down 2 levels, so that's not going to make it any easier. But Radiance last picked this Athena. It really made Weaken's job nearly impossible if he were even, let alone when he's already behind.
And I do think that was smart from them in the picks and bans. We already talked about how the Athena might have been really good to affect Ducky, but what it does to kind of mitigate Weaken as well is really strong. So I like that they kind of waited on that last solo pick from them in the picks and bans. They 10th pick this Athena, and they do a good job sort of countering a lot of what Obey were looking for. And this is another reason why Radiance are so scary. These players so flexible in terms of what they pick, and they're thinking so far ahead when they pick it and how they're building from minute 1, 2. It just makes it hard to beat them even when you're even, like we saw in game 1, much less when you're behind, like we're seeing here in game 2. And Inbound could potentially get caught out. Aror is lurking through the jungle. He dashes away, though, Inbound does, and is still safe, but that does not slow down this aggression.
And it's been really, really tough to get onto any of Radiance's backliners basically all year so far here in Season 7. But Cyclone might have finally been put into a bad spot. He still has Aegis. I don't think Ducky can really chase this one out. In fact, it's Obey again, backing up because the numbers from Radiance are here.
And Ducky agrees, not really going to be able to chase CycloneSpin in that spot. I thought you might have caster cursed him, but not quite strong enough. Maybe you haven't stretched yet. I'm not so sure, but I'm
Dude,
sure
my
you get
curse
it back
has
up and
been
revving.
strong this year, man. I don't know.
It's
It's been real strong, but it seems like it's not strong enough to kill these backliners for Radiance. BigManTingz, coming into today, only 2 deaths so far this year. That's insane. CycloneSpin, only 5. That's 7 deaths for the backliners of Radiance through their first 2 games of the season. 2 sets, that's 4 games. They've died 7 times total combined in the backline. You're going to win a lot of games when you're able to stay that safe. And that's not just a testament to them, but also the front line of Radiance.
Inbound is in a really bad spot. That Mez lasts forever, but overhand smash will proc the passive. Can anyone get in range to actually put the necessary audios in? Benji makes sure by stepping forward, and Inbound surely should die. No, he makes it back up, gets caught in the Fear No Evil, but he's okay. Wlfy with the Taiko drums is here for peel. Even Ducky's on the way. This might be a decent fight for Obey if they can find the re-engage, but that's a great pull from Aror. How does he always manage to find the pushes? BigManTingz gets the kill, and Weaken falls yet again. They turn a disaster into a chance to push.
But man, that just can't happen in that situation against Auror's Hercules. Relics were up there for adapting. He didn't beads until after he was in the middle of the entire enemy team. You can't get picked up, and then you definitely can't get hit by that driving strike in that situation. It's been a couple times where he's been hit by that, and Inbound has saved his life with a good mez to stop that driving strike guaranteed follow-up. But Inbound was out of that fight. That was just poor relic usage right there, and there's no chance you're living if you wait that long.
It really ends up hurting Weaken, and this Primal Fury should go down for Radiance. I don't want to say free. They earned it in the middle lane just now, but it will be uncontested. And this is another thing that I think that has hurt Obey there a little bit. I think what happened, and obviously I cannot know, but think of the mentality shift. That was a good defense underneath the tier 1 to where you had an opportunity to start pushing. And I think it's so hard to make sure that in that moment when you're trying to be aggressive, to still have the defensive mindset, to make sure that you're respecting their ability to turn around on you and find the burn. Maybe Weaken thought he could get away without using the beads there because they were the ones on offense for a moment, and instead he should have been mindful of the fact that they had plenty of burn potential still.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Adapting's ultimate really went to waste there, thinking that it could bring Inbound back towards this team, but it pushed him the wrong way. It doesn't do enough damage to kill him either. But this is just what Aror does to you, man. He puts you in a spot where you're not winning.
Wlfy has decided to go aggressive. He used the Thunder Crash in place, but Tingz just kills him then instead. The taunt keeps Inbound stuck in a spot he does not want to be, and we know he doesn't have the sleepy time passive this time to try and help him out. But CycloneSpin's alone in the back. Finally, the carries are isolated, but he leaps away. They don't have the damage. Somehow, CycloneSpin skirts death yet again, and now Ducky is stuck with no ultimate in a blizzard, and the cold is too much. It's a double kill for Benji on the Athena, and now they want the last couple of members, see if they can clean up Wowy. The leap over the wall is enough for Adapting to get a kill as well.
And welcome to the factory, everybody. Thank you for taking the tour for the Obey conveyor belt. Right over here, you see us going in one by one to get slaughtered by Radiance as they please. I don't know if someone told Wlfy to go in that moment, or if he thought that he wasn't going to be able to, but he had backup coming. He could have dashed towards Ducky and at least pulled Radiance into a bad spot should they want to continue that fight. But dashing on top of BigManTingz when you know the Athena ult is still up, a series of bad decisions by Obey that pull one member after the other down the conveyor belt and down into the waiting jaws of the shark that is Obey Alliance, or of Radiance rather. Now Radiance with a Fire Giant, all 5 members. The one bright spot here for Obey is they did get BigManTingz' relics, both of them. So now you got to look and see, okay, if we can try and find a way to dive Tingz before he gets those relics up, maybe we can stop this siege. Don't love those odds, but at least it's a window.
Well, there's still a lot of towers for Radiance to go grab and add onto this gold lead, and they've got plenty of time to push with this Fire Giant as well. But Obey Alliance now, as you said, do now have a chance to try and maybe punish Tingz. And not just maybe punish Tingz, but how do you like their whole base siege as a squad? Benji's in a little bit of trouble over here and right, but should be able to get away. But how do you like the way that Obey's draft just does on defense in general?
Raijin, very good on the defensive. I like him quite a bit. He's got good poke damage, can all in very well from a very, very safe distance. But I think Set has trouble finding his way into the backline a lot of the time. Wowy ultimate is great, but it's one-time use, so you got to make sure you use it at the right time, and teams are pretty good at just baiting that ult and then going in on the next wave anyways. Yorm can be difficult to siege against as well, so it's not bad.
Inbound initiating has used the Blink and the Mez, but fear no evil. Locks weaken in. He gets a bit baited in that engagement. He's the one that pays for it. They do get the kill on the Tingz, though. Remember, they knew he didn't have the relic, so they shut him down. The taunt does catch Inbound, but they don't have the follow-up damage. The 4-on-4. Mid lane are missing from one, jungle from the other, but Wlfy here to play. Shuts down Aror, and Obey Alliance push Radiance back out of their house.
But CycloneSpin still healthy enough, decides it won't be enough to keep this Phoenix siege going. That was a great find by Inbound. Really greedy pathing from Obey, especially with Tingz still not having any relics at that point. But Inbound, after finding a perfect Blink 3-man Mez, then auto-attacks BigManTingz to wake him up. He's still slowed at that point, but I assume Inbound thought he had his ultimate. It wasn't up at the time, but he auto-attacked Tingz. That nearly threw that whole engagement. Luckily enough, Weaken's able to get into the back line, gets insta-killed, but at least pulls enough attention, gets BigManTingz down with some help, but could have been even better.
This is a chance for the punish on the Wowy, who went aggressive in left lane. Adapting doesn't have the fear no evil yet. Aegis buys Wowy some time. Adapting juking around, hoping he'll find some CDs in order to reposition. They've bit off more than they can chew on this left-hand side, but Adapting has weaved his way back out of there, and now Obey might be a bit positionally committed to a fight that they don't want. Aror continuing to get aggressive, so is Benji right here next to him, but the entirety of Obey is here. This is a risky proposition, but Aror picks Weaken out of all those people that were there and plucks him back. That's the perfect target. And now he's re-engaging. Driving Strike and the Boulder. Can't find any of it, but Aror gets too greedy and Wowy cuts him down.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin sometimes with the Hercules, is that you feel like you're making all these plays and then you feel yourself a little bit too much. But it doesn't hurt Radiance too much at this point. I don't think they were going to be ready to siege Phoenixes. I actually wonder if it's best to not clear that Oni Fury right now and almost wait until Fire's about to come up, because right now is where Oni doesn't matter too much. It's pretty easy for Obey to split the map. They've still got a minute until Fire Giant spawns. This doesn't put a whole lot of pressure on any Phoenix, and it's not enough time for Radiance to use the remainder of this Fire Giant and try and find kills either. So it takes it off the map and makes sure Obey Alliance can't do it. but I think that there may be some argument to just backing, leaving 1 or 2 people there, and then waiting until about now to start doing that Oni Fury and then transitioning right on over to that fire.
Well, I doubt Obey feel great about coming out to defend this fire anyway, so we have a chance to talk a bit about these relics, because Inbound has picked up the Sunder, and I'm not sure if I'm late to notice this or if he just hit 12 late in this game, but either way, that's the option that he's gone with for that second relic, and I gotta think this is meant to try and blow up some of this front line from Radiance and punish this initiation. Where do you see them using this?
This has got to be on Benji or Aror every single time. Did you see Benji eat every cooldown from Obey Alliance and walk away half health? I mean, it's obscene how tanky this guy is at this point, because there's really just not enough pen on the other side. I mean, you've only got 20% there for Wlfy. Soul Reaver being done is going to help, but it's not enough to be the huge difference maker in killing a very, very tanky Athena. A crit build for Wowy means that it's going to be pretty hard for him to chew through this Athena very quickly. Sunder's going to make it a lot easier to kill either Athena or that Hercules.
I'm sure they wouldn't mind punishing Aror off his greedy initiations. He has been looking for the world here so far and largely getting it, only finally shut down at that last engage without getting much. But he's basically the only one that's died. Tingz finally took a spill in that last skirmish too, as Radiance are grouped up and right with the Fire Giant around their waist for yet another siege. Relics available not yet on the Aegis for Wowy. 5 seconds and he'll be good to go. But those are the beads forced out from Ducky near the front of the Phoenix.
That's the easy initiation now. It's a little bit better for Ducky to lose beads than anybody else because he at least can't get Herc plucked like everybody else on his team can.
Well, Ducky goes into the ultimate. Maybe he thought there was a heavier commitment than it actually was from Radiance. Either way, that's his ultimate down. He's a sitting duck for this Fear No Evil. They gobble him up quite easily. Aror gets the credit. Weaken in some trouble too, but Benji doesn't have the damage to finish him off. In fact, Wowy gets the punish. It's a 1-for-1, and Obey have got to find a way to reset and stay sturdy, but Wowy gets hit by an axe. He has to use the beads. He's now much more vulnerable and has to be careful. He's trying to stick around and defend this right side Phoenix, but it's getting shredded by CycloneSpin. Thunder Crash aggressively from Wlfy is just barely not enough damage.
Wow, that was close. Cyclone holds on to all the relics. An alpha male move from him to not use anything in that moment. Inbound still wants to keep this going because they know just one auto attack is going to be enough for Radiance to get this Phoenix. And Benji's coming up soon.
They kind of have to fight outside of it is their thought, but Inbound can't afford to step forward and get caught by the ranged CC. Tingz gets the kill credit, and at this point, CycloneSpin's almost back up to full. With 4 members, they can re-siege this right side Phoenix, and I don't even think Obey can defend it. It's going to fall before they even get there. It's dropped down already.
Wow.
We could try to go to the back line, but he just gets manhandled. Tingz gets another kill to improve to 4-1 and 6.
Aror normally about to pluck the enemy front line or someone in front of him, hears we can go in on the back and immediately removes him from said situation. Just beautiful play by him yet again, and now this is where the Athena ultimate, not great in those standing 5-on-5s, phenomenal that Benji's right back and setting up Ducky for another death.
Yeah, Ducky did almost nothing in these two team fights between those two deaths. Fear No Evil catches nothing as Wowy is able to evade it in time, but it does end up catching them a Phoenix. They grab the one in mid. They're even considering rotating over to left. They still got a minute and a half on this Fire Giant to work with. Aror has the FG, so he'll be able to sustain up, plus he's Hercules. But it looks like that's enough. They've gotten those 2 Phoenixes. They'll strip the jungle from Obey and instead head back to base.
They've got so much gold. I mean, almost 4K for Aror, so he's really itching to spend all that extra money, I'm sure, at this point. I mean, Obey really, Ducky made one of his first big mistakes so far today, and that's stepping up in the first place, getting taunted, losing the beads, and the next time Benji taunts, he just dashes and stares at Ducky because Ducky knows that he has to use that CC immunity, goes in with the second shot. That was a big mistake because it means that he can only go so far and sets himself up for an easy Fear No Evil. That siege was made a lot harder for Obey because Ducky just made a couple bad decisions.
Yeah, he really, I don't think, contributed anything in it. And then Obey had to fight basically 4v5 on the backside without him. The struggles continue as you go down from solo to jungle. Weaken Only got about 8,000 damage so far on this set. There's not been a lot of space for him to try and find those prolonged engages because of Benji's great itemization and play. It's been difficult. It's now inbound taunted at the fraud, brought down well below half, down below a quarter. That means Aror can start to go aggressive. Wlfy has to respond with the ultimate just so he doesn't get plucked, and Radiance can still re-siege.
And Wlfy holds on to the beads, but now without that ultimate, it's going to be harder to defend, as adapting right into that backline. Look at all this space that Radiance has to work with.
Inbound in some trouble. He's now been brought down quite low, and CycloneSpin gets the kill. Wowy in some trouble as well. The boulder follows him and flattens him down quite nicely. They'll take the feed to the left-hand side as well, and Radiance, with 5 members, red buff on 2. They're looking to go for the end. Look how low the Titan is aggro. They'll get Ducky and take care of him first. The Titan comes down as well, and Radiance, with the swift 2-0, take care of Obey.
Wow, who would have guessed that Aror was really good at Hercules? He should play that character more, man. We never see it from him this year. I mean, he's going to play that well out of nowhere on this god. He should pick it all the time. This front line for Radiance just played so well this game. I love the way that Benji and Aror were playing. It creates so much space. And like I said, coming into this set with only 7 deaths across both backliners, that's across 4 games, it doesn't happen with your front line playing poorly. That's a huge boon. It's like a running back having great stats in football. Yes, they need to have individual talent, but you have to have the offensive line in front of you. And right now, the front line for Radiance might just be one of the best in the league. Benji and Aror are both playing lights out.
You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop when it comes to these super teams, but right now with Radiance, I don't know, man. It's looking like they might just be the real deal. A swift 2-0 takes care of Obey. I'll get it back over to Dulcin and Gore to break it down further.
Much appreciated to Finch and Aggro, and great job on the call. And Gormizer, I agree with Finch. Coming into this season, the question around Radiance was never about the talent. It would be about how can these guys mesh together. Yeah. And the answer immediately is great. I mean, I think at this point, them, Sanguine, both undefeated, but Radiance might just be the top team in this league, inarguably.
And I think they not only deserve that top spot, but it goes back to very much what Aggro was saying at the end there. Having Benji and Aror as your front line makes it, I would argue, so much easier to be adapting in CycloneSpin and BigManTingz in these engagements, because you have so much room created for you. There's so much control coming from it. Like, they play so well to set up the rest of their team that it makes Radiance a different beast to tackle. And this game was a perfect example of it, right? You have game 1, where for 25 minutes, Obey is just neck and neck and causing trouble for Radiance, maintaining a small lead, but a lead nonetheless over them, making them, lose these Furies, fights, and moments like that. And then you get into game number 2, and Radiance knew what to expect, and they played to that. They recognized, okay, this is what we need to do to alter our playstyle and our draft in order to make sure that none of that happens again. None of that control exists. And there was maybe a few minutes at the very beginning of the game where it was a tug of war, and then slowly but surely it just started winning on the side of Radiance. And they just slowly scooped that up. They rode the curve off into the sky that they needed to, right? They got everything they wanted. And there were some good defenses, some good holds from Obey, but it was always a play from behind scenario, never something where they could take on Radiance and feel truly confident.
It was maybe what we wanted to see out of Radiance in Game 1. Carve out a small lead and really grow it into a resounding one. 28 minutes is the length of this one. 2-0s across the board, Week 1 and Week 2. Here are your past 3 days of SPL action. Radiance remain undefeated. Sanguine do the same as well. Only Obey still searching for that first win, as Renegades were able to beat E-United up here this morning. You'll see the standings have shifted maybe a little bit as a result, but nothing will change for these previous 2 teams, with Radiance still on top. Obey Alliance still searching for win number 1. Still small data pools here, Gormizer. And I think the surprise maybe of the SPL up to this point, not so much Radiance, but maybe Sanguine being up there undefeated. Only been 2 games, still some big matchups against very strong teams, but I think Sanguine has to be the surprise so far in how well they've come out swinging.
And I was actually in chat prior to SPL talking about this one, and it's one of those things, when you look at a lot of these other teams, they've been on the top. Some of these guys have won world champions and championships, right? what does Sanguine have that others don't? Because again, in a vacuum, then maybe you look at them mechanically, and there's going to be some players in the SPL that are better, some that are worse, right? But when you put those 5 guys together right now, what they have is hunger. It's the same thing I had mentioned kind of going into the Renegade set. It's the same way I feel about them right now. They have a hunger that is for more. I mean, It goes back to a team way, way, way back when, hungry for more. But it's that concept of you aren't being you're not setting yourself back, right? You're not holding yourself back. You want to be number 1. You want to climb as much as you can. You're not taking a loss and being like, nothing we could do about it. You're doing whatever you can to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, Gore, Sanguine will be tested once again. I guess technically this week, 5 days from now, we're going to see, or 6 days from now. I don't know. All my days are messed up, Gore. I don't know what day it is anymore. Sanguine Rival. They will be playing on Friday. 5 p.m. on Friday, Sanguine will be going up against Team Rival defending that undefeated status, but Pittsburgh Knights Space Station Gaming will be starting off that Friday broadcast at 3 p.m. What jumps out to you there, Gore? It's hard to identify maybe one specific matchup you like because there's so many good ones, but which one are you maybe most excited about as far as the entire weekend goes?
Man, most excited is very difficult to break down because I think both Sanguine sets are going to be fun. The E-United Obey should be an interesting one. But honestly, I think SSG versus Radiance might be the one that stands out the most to me, just because right now those are the teams. Radiance proving themselves to be on top. SSG kind of expected to be up towards the top. That's going to be kind of a brawl that you could expect to maybe be persistent as like top 3 SPL. That one's going to be a big determining factor for both of those teams.
And Gormizer, Sunday at 3 p.m., the opening game on Sunday, Pittsburgh Knights up against Rival. It'll be the first time these two rosters, not necessarily organizations, two rosters have played one another since the World Championships. Remember Cubo Fred over with the Knights now, Sam now over on Rival. So it's a similar look at an old matchup that we saw a few months ago on the world stage. So I think that one is going to be a lot of fun to look for.
I genuinely think, especially at the level these teams are playing at right now, the reason it's so difficult to choose a best match of the week or anything like that is just because everyone seems to be able to take on anyone. Obey, even in that last set, looked like they could control some of that against Radiance. You give them another week or two, and all of a sudden they're winning against your Space Station Gamings, and they're doing what Renegades did this week, right? So I don't think there's anyone who can be counted out just yet. Of course, it is week 2, so that makes sense. But the fact that everything is so close means that you have to pay attention every week to make sure these things go well.
Yeah, Gore, I couldn't tell you how any of the games next week or beyond are going to go. It's been a lot of fun, though. 3 days of SPL action, 6 total sets, and Radiance and Sanguine still stand on top undefeated. It's been a lot of fun. Make sure to tune in this upcoming Friday, April 17th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the Knights SSG. That'll kick off week 3 of the SPL. But on behalf of myself, Gormizer, everyone back in production, thanks for watching. We'll see you on Friday.